Okay, so this is the key to section 2.1 part 3, and basically you'll be given a graph and you'll be asked to find some information from this graph. Um, okay, so when finding the domain and range, so talk about domain first. When finding the domain, remember the domain is a set of x coordinates. Alright, so if you look at this graph and you read a graph from left to right, so as I go from left to right on the x-axis, notice my y values. They're increasing. So that's where on another worksheet you can see the words increasing. But read a graph from left to right. So as I go from left to right, notice that every point on this graph, look at the x-coordinates. The x-coordinates can be any number, any real number. And notice there's an infinite number of points on this graph, so you cannot list them as a finite set. So we're going to use interval notation to represent this infinite set. Okay? Now, when finding the domain, always go from left to right. So remember we talked about using a ruler to help you. And so notice I'm going along the x-axis on this ruler. So when I move the ruler along the x-axis, see I'm moving along the x-axis, I touch the graph when I get to this point right here. Okay? So think about where you're touching the graph. There's no arrow here. It's just an open circle. And keep in mind it is open. Alright, so I start touching the graph at this open circle. Now that x-coordinate, remember you're looking at the x-coordinate, so that x-coordinate here is -4. Now since it's an open circle, remember that open circle, that point here is not part of the graph. It's not going to be in your domain, it's not going to be in your range. But it is, when I say it's not part of the graph, basically what I mean is it's not a point on the graph, it's not a solution on the graph, but we do denote this as an open circle because that's where this graph starts. So it's going to be any number very close to this, but not including this point. Okay, this x-coordinate. So it'll be parentheses -4, comma, and then as I go along the x-axis, notice the arrow keeps on going. So this line keeps on going, or this ray rather, keeps on going as I move along the x-axis. So I'm going all the way to positive infinity. Now remember, when we talk about infinity, negative infinity for domain and range, it's always parentheses. Now for the range, I go from bottom up. So when I go from bottom up along the y-axis, see I'm going along the y-axis, I start touching the graph at this point again. Except this time, remember, you're looking at your y-coordinate. So that y-coordinate here, that point, is -1. But remember, it's an open circle, so I can't use it. -1 is not in my range. But any number bigger than -1 is, like negative 0.99999 and so on. So that's why we use an open circle here, because that y-coordinate can get all the way to -1, but not including -1. And so as I go, continue on along the y-axis, notice these points. These points here are all these y-coordinates. All these y-coordinates are these points. Okay, so that's going all the way to infinity, though. Can you see that it's going? See how this arrow keeps on going, and I'm moving along my y-axis to infinity. Okay, so that's positive infinity. All right, so that's range and domain. Okay, now the x-intercept. The x-intercept, remember, is where the graph crosses the x-axis, and they do want you to state the intercepts as an ordered pair. So keep that in mind. So here's the x-intercept right here. So that point right here is -3, 0. So x-intercept is -3, 0. Your y-intercept is here. That's where the graph crosses the y-axis. That point is 0, 3. 0, 3. So make sure you put the 0 in the right coordinate. So for x-intercept, your y-coordinate is 0, and your y-intercept, your x-coordinate is 0. Now f of -2 goes back to a previous worksheet. So again, what is the y value when x is -2? So here's where x is -2 right here. So just think about that. Here's x is -2. Here's the point on that graph. What's the y coordinate? Well, the y coordinate is 1. If you label it, this becomes -2, 1, and so my y coordinate is 1. Okay? Over here, f of 1, so here's f of 1, so remember this is x. So when x is 1, I get this point in the graph, and those coordinates are 1, 4. And so f of 1 equals 4. Okay? Alright, now letter number 2, domain and range. So again, going along the x-axis of domain. This time, notice it's a closed circle, so that point is part of the domain and is part of the range. Okay. So I am going. So it's a solution. So if you talk about these in terms of solutions, um, it is part of your solution set. It is part of your set. So this point is a point on the graph. This point is not a point on the graph because it's an open circle. So as I go from left to right, though, I start touching the graph at this point, this closed circle. Well, that x-coordinate, remember the domain set of x-coordinates, that x-coordinate is -4. Now, since it's a closed circle, I got to use bracket because -4 is part of my domain. It's a closed circle. Okay, and then I keep on going. See how it's going down? It keeps on going. See this right here? Keeps on going. Keeps on going. So as I go along the x-axis, get all these points here. This x, when x is 2, I get a point here. When x is 3, I get a point here, and so on, all the way to infinity. All right. Now the range, remember, this is an arrow, keep on going. So the range, you're going along the y-axis. So as I go along the y-axis, see, there's no bottom point. It just keeps on going. So I'm going all the way from negative infinity. See, this is pointing towards. See how this thing keeps on going. So I'm going to start at negative infinity, all the way to negative infinity, all the way. Now remember, infinity, negative infinity, always use parentheses. So all the way to. I keep on going. So let's say when I'm at x equal -1, I get this. I'm sorry, y equal -1, I get this point here. All right. So at this y value, I get a point. 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 In fact, I get a point from negative infinity all the way to, and then here's where it stops. And then that y value is 5. And it's a closed circle, so I got to use it. So 5 with a bracket. Okay, so the x-intercept, just approximate what that is. So let's say the x-intercept is -1.5. So -1.50. We're going to approximate that. So here's your x-intercept right here. Your y-intercept is easier to find. It's on a grid line, so that's -3. So 0 and -3. Okay, f of -2. So remember this says what's the y value when x is -2. Keep that in mind. What is y when x equals -2? So here's -2 right here. Right here. Look at this point and label the point if you got to. That's -2, 1. So when x is -2, my y value is 1. Over here, f of -4. Here's f of -4 right here. Here's the point. Label it. That's -4, 5. So my y value is 5. Okay. Number 3. All right, domain and range. So notice that for this graph, this parabola, you have 2 arrows pointing at the bottom. But remember, it just keeps on doing this, okay? Keeps on going all the way. I'm not drawing it very well, but all the way. So it just keeps on going like this. So since there's no closed circles or open circles, these are arrows. I want you to notice that when I talk about domain, since this is an arrow, I'm going from negative infinity all the way to keep on going. I don't stop here. I don't stop here. I don't stop here. I don't stop here either because there's a point on the graph. I don't stop here either because way down there's a point on the graph. In fact, it's all the way to infinity. So the domain's from negative infinity to infinity. Now the range, remember, you go from along the y-axis. See how these arrows are pointing down? So in terms of the range, I'm starting at negative infinity. So it'll be negative infinity 2, and then I keep on going. At this point here, I get 2 points in the graph. At this y value, I get 2 points in the graph. At this y value, I get 2 points in the graph, and so on. In fact, when I go along the y-axis, I stop here because that's the highest point. So right here is the highest point, is the maximum. So I'd look at this y value. That y value is 4. It's not a closed circle. It's an open. I'm sorry, it's not an open circle. It's a closed circle. So I'm going to have to use bracket. So 4 with a bracket. Okay, your x-intercept, there are actually 2 of them. There should be an S here, but there are 2. So these are your x-intercepts. So this, remember, you have to rise in ordered pair. So this is 0, 0 is one of them. and then 4 zeros the other. Your y-intercept is here. It's the same as one of your x-intercepts, so that's 0, 0. Okay, f of 2. So when x is 2, what's the y value? So here's x is 2. Here's the point. Label it 2, 4. When x is 2, my y value is 4. F of 3, when x is 3. So here's where x is 3 right here. Right here. And I get this point in the graph right here. And so if I label it, that is 3 comma 3. And see 3, 3. So my y value is 3. So it's just going to write in here. Okay, next one, you have this absolute value function right here. So again, domain. See how these arrows are pointing up this time? They're pointing up this time, but they're going like this. So there is no starting point here. This is going from negative infinity to positive infinity for your domain. Your range, remember you go along the y-axis. Now notice, remember here the arrows are pointing down. So I started way at the bottom, negative infinity to a maximum y value, 4. Here the arrows are pointing up. So when I go along the y-axis, I touch the graph when I get here. That's the lowest point of the graph. So that's negative 4. Notice there's no open circle, so you got to use that negative 4. So it's bracket negative 4, comma, and then there's no stopping point. You don't stop. You keep on going because these arrows keep on going up. So this can keep on going. So if you look at it, what that means is that for this, remember it keeps on doing this. For this for this y value here, there are 2 points in the graph. For this y value here, there are 2 points in the graph. For this y value, there are 2 points in the graph. Remember, it keeps on going. For this y value, there are 2 points in the graph, all the way to infinity. And remember, infinity, negative infinity, you always going to use parentheses. Okay, the x-intercept, there are 2 of them. There are 2 places where the graph crosses the x-axis. So there's this one. So that looks like negative 7, 0. And then there's this one that looks like 1, 0. The y-intercept is right here. Looks like just at negative 1. So that's 0, negative 1. And then f of 2, so you find where x is 2. So x is 2 here. You label that point, so that's 2 comma 1. So again, f of 2 means what's the y-coordinate when x is 2? Well, when x is 2, my y-coordinate is 1. So that goes here. F of negative 8. So here's negative 8. Look at your point. So that when you label that's negative 8 comma 1. So when x is negative 8, I get a y value of 1. All right. Okay, over here, now that's a little bit different from these because remember in here you had this ray and this was an open circle, this was a closed circle with an arrow. Here you have this segment, but you have an open and a closed circle. There are no arrows. So just keep in mind what's going to happen since there's no arrows. Since there are no arrows, you're not going to use parentheses at all since there are no arrows. Okay, so when I look at domain, when I talk about domain, when I go from left to right, I start touching the graph here at negative 3. All right, now since that's an open circle, I'm going to use parentheses. And then I'm going to go all the way, and then notice I'm going along the x-axis. So I'm going to go all the way, and then I stop here at this x-coordinate. So that x-coordinate is 3. Now, since that's a closed circle, that's part of my graph, I am going to use a bracket. So open circle, closed circle. Notice there's no infinity here because there are no arrows. Look, if you go back and look at all the ones with the arrows, there was some infinity, negative infinity involved. Okay, now the range, I'm going to go from bottom up. So notice that when I talk about the range, I'm starting when I talk about range, I'm going along the y-axis. So I start here, this y-coordinate. Notice it's a closed circle, so I'm going to have to include this y-coordinate. So that's bracket negative 2, all the way to, and then I stop here at this open circle, which has y-coordinate 4. So, but I got to put that in parentheses. All right, so make sure you put a bracket parentheses here. All right, the x-intercept, here's the only x-intercept I see, and the coordinates here are 1, 0. The y-intercept, here's the only y-intercept I see, and those coordinates are 0, 1. F of 2 means what's the y coordinate when x is 2. So I find x equal to find x equal to here. Look at the point, label it. That's 2 comma negative 1. That's 2 negative 1. So my y coordinate is negative 1. So that goes here. F of negative 2, so that's here. So x equal negative 2 is here. Here's the point of the graph. Label it, negative 2 comma 3. And so my y coordinate is 3. Okay? All right, so that takes care of the key to section 2.1, part 3.